Well, good frigid morning to you all from Austin, Texas. A whopping 22 this morning. Maybe it'll get 30 today, maybe it won't. As Jason Mraz just said to all of you, welcome. You're my best friends, every one of you. It's good to see your faces this morning. So, welcome. I'm going to light our candle to begin our service. And keep me warm. We welcome you to this spiritual community of hope, courage, and compassion. I would like for you to take a deep breath and release it as we ready our hearts and minds to enter this precious space together. I see some new faces and it makes me very happy, and some old ones too. Today, we welcome back with us Rebecca Mattis. She will fill us in on why do people say, don't be such a Pollyanna. Who is Pollyanna anyway? I know I'm looking forward to finding out, as you are, but first, a reading. Gratitude. It's not happiness that brings us gratitude. It's gratitude that brings us happiness. Rebecca Mattis lives in Rutland, Vermont, where it's warmer there today than it is here, where she teaches math and English to adult students, including English language learners from all over the world. She loves to read, think, and write about ideas and has written many sermons over the years. We always look forward to the varied topics that she brings to us. And so I bring you Rebecca. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mary. And thanks everyone for having me back. So I've always considered my temperament to be a pretty happy one. I'm actually not particularly optimistic. I'm just very sensitive to beauty. The year I was 14, I spent most of the year smiling. I have no idea why. In fact, I smiled so much that the constant refrain of my fellow students was, "Are you on drugs?" It was evident that my high school peers found angst and turmoil more attractive and interesting than happiness. Unfortunately, their negative responses led me to stop smiling so much. Later on, I became aware of the derogatory term Pollyanna. "What a stupid Pollyanna," I would hear, or "I'm no Pollyanna." Perhaps having had my smiles met with suspicion in high school primed my curiosity when, over the years, I continued to hear people scorning cheery optimism in this way. Pollyanna is the main character in a book of the same name, published in 1913 by Eleanor Porter. In 1960, a movie version was released, and a man named David Swift had been given the task of adapting the book and directing the film. He said of the book's main character, "Pollyanna was so filled with happiness and light that I wanted to kick her." Yikes! Is she really so bad? That's what I'm here to explore. There are several definitions for the term Pollyanna. One is excessively, blindly, unreasonably, or illogically optimistic. For example, someone who continues to invest in pyramid schemes, believing that this time they'll make $1 million for sure. Another common definition is someone who is constantly seeing misfortunes as blessings, especially someone who's always inviting others to see their own misfortunes this way. For example, "Oh, it's a good thing you nearly died of amoebic dysentery because now you've lost so much weight." And a third definition compares Pollyanna to someone who lives with their head in the sand. This person may be so afraid of bad news that they refuse to hear any warnings or think through problems, and never, therefore, take any action. To summarize, a Pollyanna is a foolishly optimistic person with a bright, disengaged smile and a willfully ignorant mind. I can certainly understand why someone would be impatient with such a person. But what about the real Pollyanna, the main character of the 1913 book? Why did the film director want to kick her? Does she deserve her reputation as ignorant and annoying? Well, let's find out. The story begins when Pollyanna goes to live with her Aunt Polly, a rather severe and bitter person, after the death of her doting father. Pollyanna's father had been a minister, and they lived out west in poverty, dependent for everything on donations in the form of missionary barrels. One year, Pollyanna was longing for a doll, but all she got from the barrel was a pair of crutches. Pollyanna's father, wanting to alleviate his daughter's disappointment, made up a game. Find something to be happy about with the crutches. The answer to the riddle was, I'm happy I don't need them. After that, the glad game, as they called it, became a regular practice for Pollyanna. The object is to find something to be glad about in any distressing situation. Pollyanna is quite the expert at this game, and her temperament makes her such a natural that all disappointments are shrugged off, and she spends her days filled with gratitude and joy for the things she has. I think one could make reasonable criticisms of this game, but it's important to understand why Pollyanna's father taught it to her. Pollyanna's first decade of life was not easy. Her mother died young, and while her life with her father was spiritually and emotionally rich, it was materially poor, with very few beautiful objects and barely sufficient necessities. It is evident that her father didn't want Pollyanna to be resentful in her poverty, but to manage her disappointment by developing gratitude. Though Pollyanna is just a child, her glad game is a powerful spiritual practice, and she continues it after she travels to Vermont to live with her Aunt Polly. I wish I had time to tell you the major plot points of the book because it's an interesting little parable and it can also be very funny. One of my favorite parts is how Pollyanna, all unwittingly, foils every attempt of her aunt to punish her. Aunt Polly tries to shame her niece for various infractions, but because Pollyanna habitually sees the good in everything and everyone, she invariably interprets these punishments as rewards. Far from wanting to kick Pollyanna, at these moments I laugh and cheer. To illustrate this, take a look at this Far Side cartoon. So if you can't read the caption, the devils are saying to each other, you know, we're just not reaching that guy. Look at the way the character is drawn. Gary Larson has made him look skinny, cross-eyed, and foolish. But is he really weak and stupid? Is he worthy of scorn? Seems to me he's actually the smartest guy around. His good cheer even defeats Satan. Similarly, Pollyanna's glad game, while naive in a way, becomes a kind of superpower. Pollyanna is an extremely outgoing, ultra-confident, and sweet little person who never feels slighted when people are rude, and therefore she makes many friends in her new town. The author makes each villager a kind of foil to Pollyanna. Pollyanna is grateful for everything she has. Mrs. Snow, the hypochondriac, by contrast, wants everything she doesn't have and appreciates nothing she does have. Pollyanna is both humble and generous. Mr. Pendleton, the rich miser, is the most entitled character you'll ever meet, and when he doesn't get what he wants, he sulks for actual decades. Pollyanna is exuberant and uncalculated. Aunt Polly is coldly dutiful and emotionally stunted. Even though the book focuses on her glad game, and that's what people remember about her and perhaps find most annoying, Pollyanna's real power lies in her way of treating people. She has a great love of goodness, and she always speaks to the best in everyone. She attributes all of their behavior to the highest sentiments, in rather hilarious contrast to the selfish or dysfunctional motivations they might actually have. And thus the villagers, faced with Pollyanna's trust in them, begin to shed the neuroses they've wrapped themselves up in. They all start to think along the lines of that old bumper sticker. God, help me to become the person my dog thinks I am. And it works. Pollyanna's refreshing encouragement helps her new friends develop gratitude, generosity, emotional resilience, and hopefulness. By the end of the book, the entire village is transformed by Pollyanna's presence in their lives. To be fair, the book is pretty unrealistic. All of the characters are caricatures, not real human portraits. The villagers may have faults, but none are violent or evil. Nothing is complicated by roadblocks or red tape. And the village has hardly any children, which actually makes it an accurate portrait of 2024 Vermont. Almost all of Pollyanna's companions are 10 or 20 years older than she is. But I also think the book contains a lot of truth. You don't have to look very hard in order to find a person who is working to transform your community, or one who has a smile for everyone, or one willing to dig in whenever help is needed. Good news is everywhere. Maybe not as much as we want, but it's there every day. Furthermore, we know how important it is in a life well lived to express gratitude, to connect with and serve others, and to see the best in people. And the fact is that Pollyanna isn't always happy. Sometimes she's too sad or lonely to want to play the glad game. And toward the end of the book, she's hit by a car and becomes paralyzed from the waist down. When she learns that she'll never walk again, she's so devastated that she becomes unable to play the glad game. She tries to tell herself things to be grateful for, but she doesn't really feel it. In the end, it's her new friends who are determined to give her something to be glad about. They each decide to do more good in the world for her sake, and it's their positive actions that lift Pollyanna out of her depression. And so I ask, what's so bad about being a Pollyanna? What could possibly be wrong with the emotions she represents? Joy, contentment, friendship, perspective, gratitude, gladness. Nothing is wrong with these. They're necessary. And nobody should be scorned for holding these qualities in abundance or for trying to encourage others with them. So Pollyanna is entirely benign, just like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Look at this soft, cute little guy. Do you remember what happened in the Ghostbusters movie? The Ghostbusters team was fighting an evil spirit who could read minds. One of the team was trying to imagine something that was completely harmless, and he landed on this sweet little mascot for Stay Puft Marshmallows. But then the evil spirit reads his mind, takes the form of this mascot, grows to enormous stature, and starts to attack the city. So let's see the new Stay Puft monster. There he is, attacking the city. Could this happen to Pollyanna? Could she ever become a monster? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. One example of the Pollyanna monster is found in the 2009 book Bright-Sided by Barbara Ehrenreich, who wrote it after having undergone treatment for breast cancer. She was dismayed to discover that there was enormous pressure to remain upbeat while struggling with the disease. Friends, relatives, and strangers alike were telling people with cancer not to give in to upsetting emotions. The idea behind this was that positive thinking and visualization will help fight cancer. But it's not true. Now, If you recover from cancer or any other illness and attribute your health to positive thinking, prayer, or belief in a higher power, that is a spiritual matter. Such a belief would be deeply personal and deeply important. But it's not science, and for our culture to have presented it as such shows a distressing lack of compassion for people who are suffering. To quote Barbara Ehrenreich, rather than providing emotional sustenance, the sugar coating of cancer can exact a dreadful cost. First, it requires the denial of understandable feelings of anger and fear, all of which must be buried under a cosmetic layer of cheer. She goes on, there is a problem when positive thinking fails and the cancer spreads or eludes treatment. Then the patient can only blame herself. She's not being positive enough. Possibly it was her negative attitude that brought on the disease in the first place. At this point, the exhortation to think positively is an additional burden to an already devastated patient. This is what I mean by the Pollyanna monster. Under the guise of positive thinking, cancer patients have been told that they somehow caused the disease with their thoughts, or even that they wanted or needed to get cancer. Patients may be led to believe that in order to heal, they must remain positive 100% of the time. The real Pollyanna would never have said such a thing to anyone. Her glad game was aimed at improving her own quality of life, and she encouraged other people to play because she thought it might help them too. But she never played the game with someone who didn't want to play. She was quite conscientious in that regard. If someone was suffering, she gave them compassion. Furthermore, she did not blame people for their own illnesses or bad life situations. Rather, she did everything she could to alleviate their discomfort. She visited them, brought them food, and hung prisms in their windows to make rainbows for them. None of this action was particularly linked in her mind with her glad game. She just helped people as a matter of course because she believed in serving her neighbors. So people who insult others by calling them Pollyanna, accusing them of hiding their heads in the sand and thinking that all you have to do is smile and think positive and all good things will just happen, they have Pollyanna all wrong. Pollyanna worked very hard to make the world a better place, and she treated people with empathy and encouragement. There's a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde quality to Pollyanna. On one hand, there's the character in the book who illustrates pretty decent values and spiritual practices. On the other hand, there's the unfair cultural representation of her. The field of positive psychology has a similar dual nature. What it really is, and how it's sometimes portrayed in media and expressed in culture. When Barbara Ehrenreich wrote Bright-Sided, she placed her criticisms of the tyranny of positive thinking squarely in the context of the rise of positive psychology, which was a dominant subject at the time. To quote from Wikipedia, positive psychology began as a new domain of psychology in 1998, when Martin Seligman chose it as the theme for his term as president of the American Psychological Association. It is a reaction against past practices which tended to focus on mental illness and which emphasized maladaptive behavior and negative thinking. The field applies science to the study of human flourishing. Unfortunately, as with all science, the findings can get quite distorted in media and culture. The Pollyanna monster is real, and nowadays that monster is labeled toxic positivity. As we learned from Barbara Ehrenreich, positivity is toxic when it stands in the way of empathy. One example of toxic positivity can be found in the story of Pollyanna herself. Though I'm a fan of Pollyanna and I'm sad that she's so misrepresented, I also know that her character is not perfect. The author points out a tragic flaw in her philosophy, which is that Pollyanna thinks that unpleasant feelings are bad. Pollyanna's father told her before he died not to grieve for him. She does grieve, but she tries not to. She tries, not always successfully, to be happy that he's now in heaven with the rest of her departed family. Although he meant well, her father did a terrible thing to Pollyanna in this. Grief feels horrible, but it is appropriate, necessary, and I would say good. Indeed, it may be my own experience with grief that piqued my skepticism when I first heard of positive psychology. When I grieve, I'm happy to grieve. And on the days when I smile despite my grief, I'm sad to be smiling. At these times of emotional pain and confusion, I try to have compassion for myself. This is Pollyanna's shortcoming. The glad game was all very well, and her effect upon others was wonderful, but she doesn't know how to practice self-compassion. She habitually talks herself out of negative feelings, sometimes for the better, but sometimes for the worse. Understanding the difference between positive psychology and toxic positivity requires understanding the difference between human thriving and so-called positive emotion. Positive emotions feel good, but they are not necessarily better for you than negative emotions. The worst possible thing in the world for your health would be to achieve a state in which you had no negative emotion. Then you would be without fear. You would smilingly walk out in front of a speeding truck, and that would be the end of you. Positive psychology done right is the study not only of emotions that feel good, but of human thriving in general, which includes emotions that feel bad. When people talk about wanting to be happy, I don't think they usually mean feeling positive all the time. I think they want a life of meaning and resilience. Oddly, happiness doesn't bring happiness. It's gratitude, empathy, mindfulness, and connection that do. As Nathaniel Hawthorne said, happiness is a butterfly, which, when pursued, is always beyond our grasp, but which, if you will sit down quietly, may alight upon you. If I were one of those middle-aged folks in Pollyanna's life, there would be things we already share and things we could teach each other. I would be right there with her in her gratitude practice and in the pleasures she takes in life. I would encourage her in the art of mindfulness and self-compassion so that she learns to accept and appreciate all of her feelings. Happiness is lovely, and a certain amount is absolutely crucial in order to live well, but it's empathy for yourself especially that makes for a life well lived. As I was looking through the book again recently, something struck me that hadn't before. The most fundamental thing that Pollyanna gives to the people in her village is her physical presence. I feel like the past few years have been a 1-2 punch of the social media takeover of society and the isolation of the COVID pandemic. Unfortunately, I think I've become much too comfortable with isolation. This is one thing that Pollyanna is teaching me this year, that I want to do everything I can to promote in-person connections. That is to say, hanging out with my neighbors. Pollyanna is relentless. She just won't stop visiting people and being all innocent and bubbly. Maybe that's why the movie scriptwriter wanted to kick her. She just doesn't give up. But it seems to me that's what it's going to take in 2024 if we want to thrive in our communities. The second lesson I'm taking to heart from Pollyanna this year is her absolute superpower, that of seeing the best in people. Pollyanna is surrounded by imperfect people, and she knows they're imperfect, but she believes in their desire for goodness. It's such an entrenched belief that she doesn't even know she believes it. It's not a game she plays, like her gratitude practice. It's just how she operates. She elevates everyone around her by her embodiment of the principle of charity. I want to be like that, not only because I think it will improve my life and my community, but because I believe Pollyanna is right about people. Our motivations may not always be as selfless as she would imagine, but everyone is doing their best. I want to have the courage to see through other people's foibles. I want to see in them what is truer than true. Maybe I even want to be a little bit relentless. If I succeed, will people call me a Pollyanna? It's funny, since people use Pollyanna as an insult, I'd say that even happiness should be met with empathy. You know, when I went around smiling at age 14, I wish my classmates had just smiled back at me. I let their skepticism bother me then, but I don't anymore. I'm glad I have something in common with Pollyanna. I'm going to build on that. And if anyone calls me a Pollyanna, I'll be a Pollyanna and take it as a compliment.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's wonderful. We're going to take some time now. Instead of a Q&A, we're just calling it time to respond. If you have a question for Rebecca, that's fine. But if you want to make any particular comment about Pollyanna or anything else today, this is not Joys and Concerns. We'll do that later. But just if anyone would like to respond to her, we'll take the time to do that. And I do ask if you can, there's a reaction button at the bottom of your Zoom, and there's the raised hand. If you could use that to whatever you want to respond to, that would be great. And that way you come to the top of our screen and we can call on you and then you can unmute. Excuse me, if for whatever reason the reaction button is not working for you, do raise your hand and I'll do my best to find you and call on you. All right, this is our time to respond to Rebecca's Pollyanna sermon. Oh, okay, Carol Knight, unmute.
Thanks. Thank you, Rebecca, for that very wonderful sermon. I appreciate it. And I related to it because my daughter last year went through a year of almost intolerable long COVID symptoms. And as she was recovering from that, she got breast cancer. And through that entire journey, she was involved with a bunch of women, all of whom sort of suffered from toxic positivity. They told her that it was all in her mind, you know, the whole thing that you described. And it made a very difficult situation even worse. And so I'm really glad that I'm gonna ask her to watch this so she can hear what you had to say, because I know it would help her a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Dagmar, I saw your hand up a minute ago. Do you still have something to respond? Unmute if you do.
Well, I'm in a situation very similar to Carol's, but ongoing. My brother, who is actually 5 years younger than I, so he should be taking care of me, relies on me, not by choice, but by default. He never got married, so he had no children. He has, for the last year, after a serious breakdown, complete collapse, he is bedbound by choice, and totally blind, not by choice. And I've done what I can for him. I have sold his house and the contents of his house. He will never be there, and needs to pay for expensive room and board in an assisted living situation. And there are a couple of people who stop in and visit him, but I am really his only link to life. And I have to psych myself up for these visits because he complains about little mess in such a assisted living situation. One thing that happens all the time, I guess there's a lot of turnover. So his part of his laundry is lost, and so that's a lot of complaints like that. I don't know exactly how to deal with that.
Let's see. Thank you for sharing that, Dagmar. It's either Joan or Martin. The hand's up over by y'all. Unmute.
It's a wonderful talk. I can see it as a TED talk, and I think maybe Greg should consider it for his Food for Thought series. And I'm reminded of a wonderful pithy saying that I made up. It's hard to smile with a stiff upper lip.
Oh, true. True words, Martin. Thank you. You'll take your hand down. Susan Powell, your hand's up, girl. Good to hear from you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much, Rebecca. It was really appropriate, particularly for me today. I've been accused of being a bit of a Pollyanna most of my life, but never took any bother with it. I was like, yeah, that's good. I'm good with it. But yesterday it really came home to roost. I was taking down some Christmas lights and fell off of a ladder and broke my fall with my face on an iron chair and then slammed onto the concrete on my shoulder. And once I got over the shock, I literally said, thank you so much, God, for not making this so much worse. Because I could have broken my neck, I could have broken my teeth, I could have broken my back, took me about 10 minutes to get up, and then since then I've been mostly in bed. But honestly, I feel like a positive attitude takes me a long way in life. And I do think, sort of back to that fable that, maybe like, particularly you're talking about the breast cancer person who, was not, basically her feelings weren't validated. And I think that does take it too far, because we can't tell other people how to feel. We can only live by example. And you got to take what you get. But all that to be said, I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much. Martin, I'm going to steal the line you used. And Dagmar, I'm saying a prayer for you and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I'm so glad it wasn't worse, that you're in one piece. Greg,
thank you.
Yeah, remarkable, Rebecca. I really enjoyed it, and if maybe I'll talk to you later about it, but I would like to maybe show this I have Food for Thought twice a month, and we have TED Talks and so on, but your talk was very inspirational, I think, for me and for, I think, many of us here. And I guess my question is, when did you first discover the Pollyanna literary person? I mean, when did you first encounter the book, and how did that start this for you? Or, yeah.
Well, after I kept hearing her name, I had to find out why. And so that was around, I don't know, the early 2000s. I'm like, I need to read this book. I need to find out what's going on. So that's what started it. And I've just been I've been thinking about the subject ever since age 14. Like, what is up with happiness and how people interact with it, both positively and negatively. And yeah, it's just an ongoing interest of mine.
Wow. Very good. Well, we're blessed to hear you today. I must say, remarkable talk. So I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Anybody else? Richard, unmute.
Good morning, all, and thank you, Rebecca. That was a real. I was wondering what the talk was going to be about when I saw the title. So it was great. It was really good. And I want to take this opportunity to introduce Judy Mayo, who is joined today. And the lead-in is she is a naturally positive person. I won't call her Pollyanna because maybe somebody would think that's an insult, but naturally positive, and we're glad to have her today.
Yes.
And Sid Aaron, I think, is in the room.
Yep, he's right over here.
Or was in the room. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Richard, and welcome, Judy. And also I'd like to welcome back Paula Pulaski to our service. She was at our Friday fellowship. Yay. Debbie, I think you're ready to go.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yep.
Whoa, the little things on my phone are so small, I can't tell what I'm doing. Rebecca's talk reminded me of so many things that were good to be reminded of. One was watching the Pollyanna movie, which came out, I guess, at the right time for me. Haley Mills was the star, and all the people I knew were watching it, and we missed so much. It makes you realize how you could watch something and think we were plot driven. We just didn't get it. And the other thing was Barbara Enright. I'm going to mess her name up. And, I hadn't realized about her struggle with cancer until I heard that she had died. And she was such a compassionate person. I don't know if any of you remember Nickel and Dimed, which she wrote. And to take a very educated woman with a PhD that put herself literally in the position of people that were cleaning houses for pennies and writing about it and writing about how society treats people like that. And I think she had a very good attitude toward compassion, and when we need it, and when it is maybe off, when people think they're being compassionate, as in positive toxic positivity, I think people think they're being compassionate, but they're not. And anyway, it just got me to thinking about that, and I kind of would like to go back and read Barbara's other book, although I kind of imagine it may be painful. And that's it.
Thank you, Debbie. Anybody else? Last call before we close today. All right. Rebecca, I think you have our closing reading, if we can see that graphic.
So this is a poem by Coleman Barks, who based it off of a poem by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Rebecca, so much for being with us again. And your titles and your sermons always intrigue and leave leave a lot for us to think about. We will send you all off in a moment. But if you can stick around for Joys and Concerns, we would love that. If you need to go, I would say this: may we in this fellowship be so bold, so open, and so insightful to carry with us Pollyanna's characteristics. May we go in peace, go in love, go in kindness. This world needs you. We need you. And I'll extinguish our candle. And again, what we'll do now is send you off with our love ritual. But those of you who can stick around, Joan Denson will be here, I think happy as Pollyanna, right? To do Joys and Concerns. So stick around if you can. If you can't, stay warm. And we will see you next time. Thank you again, Rebecca. Loved it.